Welcome, students of the Word. I am absolutely delighted to have you join me today for this explainer of Genesis 18. We're going to take a profound, literal, grammatical, historical journey through what I actually like to call a hinge chapter in the book of Genesis. You see, in these 33 verses, we find ourselves standing right between two staggering realities. On the one hand, we have this incredible, life-giving promise delivered in the humble, dusty shade of Abraham's tent. And on the other hand, we have the terrifying, righteous judgment of fire and brimstone looming over the wicked city of Sodom. It's a stunning contrast, really. We're going to explore how the exact same God who creates life out of a barren womb perfectly and justly weighs the sins of nations. So, let's dive right in. Here is the roadmap for our time together today. We will cover 1. Historical and cultural background, 2. The biblical narrative, 3. Theological significance, 4. Spiritual lessons and application, and 5. Conclusion. Now, before we look at the text itself, we really need to establish our dynamic theological engine. We are operating strictly within the dispensation of promise. Why does this matter? Well, because a proper, literal grammatical framework demands that we understand exactly where we are in God's programmatic history. Remember, we're prior to the giving of the Mosaic Law here. We are entirely anchored by the Abrahamic covenant, an unconditional unilateral pact where God alone binds himself to bless the specific man, to form a specific nation, and eventually to bless all nations through his seed. If we lose sight of this foundational covenant, we literally lose the blueprint of redemptive history. So keep this dispensational context firmly in mind as we proceed.
Let us examine the historical and cultural background.
The setting is near the great oaks of Mamre, right up in Abraham's highland base near Hebron. It's the oppressive midday heat. You know, the time of day when ancient travelers would seek shelter, definitely not travel. But suddenly 3 visitors arrive. Now, what's deeply profound here is the systematic theology at play, specifically our Christology. The text tells us plainly, the Lord appeared, yet Abraham initially sees 3 men. One of these men speaks with absolute, sovereign divine authority. This is a theophany, or actually, more accurately, it's a Christophany, a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus Christ. Think about the sheer awe of this moment. The creator of the universe, accompanied by angelic attendants, condescends to sit in the dirt and eat roasted meat with a nomad. Scripture portrays God's presence here, allowing him to address a human being face to face without consuming him in his holy fire. He is close, he's personal, and as we'll soon see, he knows exactly what is hidden in the human heart.
Let us examine the biblical narrative.
We're shifting our study now into the chronological flow of the text, beginning with Abraham's urgent, lavish hospitality. Just look at the verbs in the text. Abraham runs to meet them. He bows low. He offers water for their dusty feet and the cool shade of the tree. He hurries Sarah to bake bread from fine flour, and he runs out to the herd to select a tender calf. We have to understand the cultural weight here. In the ancient Near East, meat was a rare luxury, reserved only for the highest festivals or royal guests. Preparing it, that took hours of intensive labor. So this isn't just a casual snack. It's a lavish, costly banquet prepared on the fly. This exceeding generosity perfectly reflects God's own heart, and it really sets a biblical pattern for us. Abraham, who is the recipient of overwhelming grace, naturally overflows with grace toward his guest.
As they eat, the divine visitor makes a stunning declaration. He says, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife will have a son." Now Sarah, listening from inside the tent, laughs to herself. She's old, well past childbearing years. Her laugh is this private shield of disappointment and cynicism. But the Lord hears the silent laugh of the heart. He responds with this pivotal, stabilizing question. Is anything too hard for the Lord? It's a rhetorical question that has steadied saints for millennia. The God who created the heavens and the earth, he's not bound by biology. He operates entirely on his own calendar.
And this brilliantly illustrates the nature of biblical prophecy. We see a dual application here. We have the strict historical fulfillment. The promise is pinned to a literal calendar about this time next year. And indeed, precisely within a year, Isaac is born. But we also see the grand prophetic fulfillment. You see, Isaac's birth is not merely a family joy, it is covenant continuity. Through this specific physical line, a great nation will be formed, and ultimately, all nations of the earth will be blessed through the coming Messiah.
Following the meal, the Lord looks down towards Sodom and reveals his intent to investigate the outcry of their grave sin. What follows is hands down one of the most remarkable conversations in all of Scripture. Abraham remains standing before the Lord and begins to reverently negotiate for the city. Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked, he asks. He starts at 50, then 45, then 40, stepping carefully, humbly, all the way down to 10 righteous people. With every step, God agrees to spare the city if the remnant is found. This beautifully demonstrates that God's justice is not some rash outburst of anger. It is measured, it's true, and it is immensely patient.
Let us examine the theological significance.
Let's break down the profound doctrines anchored in this hinged chapter. First, we look at hamartiology. That's the study of sin. The great outcry against Sodom reaching heaven shows the absolute severity of human depravity and the reality that sin demands divine justice. God descends to personally investigate, proving he really is the judge who does right. But right alongside this, we see brilliant flashes of soteriology, the doctrine of salvation. God is entirely willing to spare a wicked city for the sake of a righteous remnant. His mercy is just as profound as his impending wrath.
Now, as conservative students of the Word, we must note our ecclesiology here by drawing a strict distinction between two biblical programs. First, we have God's program for national Israel. This is the foundational earthly program being promised and birthed right here, strictly through the physical line of Isaac. We must contrast this earthly program with the church, God's completely separate later mystery program, comprised of both Jew and Gentile. The church is entirely distinct from the earthly national promises being solidified with Abraham here for the nation of Israel. Confusing these two distinct programs will absolutely derail your biblical understanding.
So the crucial point is this: how exactly does God intend to bring about his grand plan? Read the text with me. For I have chosen him, so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just. Now, why does the God of the universe care about the mundane details of our homes? Because the promised blessing to the nations does not bypass daily, ordinary righteousness. The mission to the world is profoundly domestic. God's global architecture is built with the bricks of household faithfulness, fathers and mothers teaching their children the justice and ways of the Lord.
Let us examine the spiritual lessons and application.
We absolutely must turn our academic exposition into pastoral instruction for our daily walk. First up, hospitality. Abraham's hurried preparation teaches us that open tables multiply grace. When was the last time you inconvenienced yourself to welcome a stranger or a neighbor into your home? Churches and homes that welcome others often find that God meets them in the giving. Second, faith. Like Sarah, we've got to bring our quiet cynicism into the light. When you're worn out and disappointed, honest prayer conquers that disbelief, relying on the God for whom absolutely nothing is too hard. Third, leadership. Parents and leaders, your quiet faithfulness at home, modeling fairness, confessing sin, instructing in godliness, that private obedience actually becomes a public blessing. And let's look at how this chapter defines biblical intercession. True intercession isn't just bargaining with God for a loophole. It's an act of love grounded in God's justice. It's approaching the Creator with reverent boldness, knowing we are but dust and ashes, and pleading on the basis of His goodness. Abraham asks that the presence of the righteous might bring blessing to a corrupt city. Believers today must learn to pray this way for their own cities and leaders, keeping hope alive, even when modern headlines darken.
Let us examine the conclusion. Genesis 18 beautifully binds together the tenderness of the Lord's home visit with the terrifying gravity of his judgment. The God who cares about the outcry of cities is the very same God who tastes milk and bread in a nomad's camp and speaks life into a barren woman's hidden laughter. God's grand redemptive plan moves powerfully through the corridors of power and the justice of nations, but it moves just as purposefully through the quiet kitchens of our homes. Let me leave you with the weight of this scripture once more. Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh? Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." The Lord returns at the time He sets. His word never fails, and His justice never sleeps. May you live close enough to hear His promise and bold enough to pray for your neighbors. For more in-depth studies, visit the Grace and Knowledge Series blog at woodybrohm.online.